All right, good morning, guys. Today is April 10th, and I'm doing something a little bit different because I'm away. But I was able to get up this morning and I'm in 2 Samuel chapter 17 through chapter 19, verse 40. Today I'm actually going to break it up in two parts because starting tomorrow we begin with First Kings. So I want to go ahead and I want to complete uh this chapter so tomorrow I can be on track for where we're supposed to be. But it was so much to cover this morning and I wanted to get it out that I'm going to do the second part later on. So this is going to be my breakfast, and later on that's going to be my dinner. I'm going to be chewing on the word and enjoying it, which is something that I'm hoping by now everybody has tried to make a habit of doing, spending time intentionally but receiving the word as spiritual food, because it's just accepting the fact that we're spiritual beings and that we need this spiritual food, right? So in chapter 17 we see that Absalom is being advised basically to go ahead and to kill David and to feed him. They have established like such a great army put together, and this was like the perfect time for them to be able to go ahead and actually have victory over David. But the thing that I like that that he said to Absalom, one of the advisors, was, "I will bring all the people back to you as a bride returns to her husband." And I just love it because it's synonymous in what we have going on today and what we're actually looking for as the bride of Christ. So I just thought that was a nice reference there, right? But what Absalom actually did was the first set of advice that he got was from the advisor who was betraying David. But now he actually goes now and asks the other advisor that David sent. And David sent him intentionally to cause like discord and to override the other advisor. So when the plan was presented to him, he was like, no, that's not a good idea. And he gave him a whole nother plan. And then he actually went and he warned David, right? Which was what he was pretty much sent there to do. So, in him warning David, somebody else witnessed that. And so they ran back to Absalom, David's son, and let him know that they had been deceived by the advisor that David had sent. So now it was like once that person knew that that happened, of course, now they're looking for him. But he was able to take cover and be hidden by people who were there. So when they came looking for the advisor that was still on David's side, he was able to hide, right? And so now we see that Absalom is defeated. I mean, it's really nowhere else for him to be because he went out. Because I think one of the things that he did was he went out to lead his troops. And one of the things that we know about David was that David was a leader. He was a mighty warrior. Like it was one of those things. He wasn't out there just trying something because he felt like he had a title that he didn't earn. And it's actually funny because in this instance, David actually didn't even go out with his troops because his troops felt like it's okay if we die, but it's a whole nother thing if you die. So they was like, your life is worth 10,000 of ours, which is great and which is very honorable. But Absalom, of course, not having any kind of direction, not having any kind of good leadership, he went out and he led his because I guess that was something that he probably admired about his father and something that he wanted to be remembered as, right? That's not recorded in scripture. That's just something that I'm believing from my reading. As always, I say the word is there for your spirit, for you to receive whatever it is you need to receive. And that's why it's so important to actually dig in on your own, right? But it says that during the fight that of course David's men slaughtered Absalom's men, and it was so much bloodshed, but they were outmatched, and Absalom went to flee. And actually, in him fleeing, his hair got caught inside a tree and he hung there. And one of the people witnessed that and they ran back and they told Joab, who was the leader over David's army. And he was like, "Why didn't you kill him?" And the guy said, "I heard what David said. David expressed from his heart that it was his desire that Absalom be spared because it's still his son, right?" And I guess on so many levels, there was a sense of like probably guilt and shame for what happened to cause Absalom to come against him in such a great manner. And so that guy was like, "I don't care how many like pieces of silver you offer me, I wouldn't do it for even more because that's not something that the king desires." So Joab pretty much took matters into his own hands and he went and he stabbed Absalom to kill him, but he was still alive in the tree. But then he had the men come around him and actually finish the job. So Absalom was killed and his body was buried where he was. Yeah. So it was, Absalom still had a monument made in honor of him because during everything, he didn't have any sons, right? Okay, so now we see that David mourns Absalom's death because them knowing that David would be in mourning, they actually sent someone else ahead to give David the news that his son was dead. But Joab's son was like, "Let me get in front of him because I already know that when David finds out that his son is dead, he's not going to be happy." So and but the watchman saw him when he was running. And when he was stopped, he was like, "Oh, it was so much commotion going on that, I left. I really don't know what happened." And then after that, the Ethiopian guy came and told David that Absalom had been killed, like, that there was a great and immediately David was overcome with sorrow. And now he went into like a period of mourning. And then we see in the next chapter that Joab rebukes him because he's like, once they saw David in mourning, now all of his men are now in mourning as well. And Joab is like, "That's not fair. Like your son did something that was so, and he pretty much got what he deserved for what he had done." And he was like, "But now you walk around and your men feel ashamed for what they've done for you." And so basically he was like, "We're not doing that. Like you need to get it together." And so now it's almost like everybody pretty much came together and agreed again that David should return to Israel and become king again. So we see that one of the things that he does when he goes back to Israel is the first thing he does is to have mercy on people. And we see this with the ones who initially when he was about to be killed, and this was Saul's descendants, and they had actually attacked David and threw dirt at him and pretty much said that he was going to get what they should get. And he actually cursed David. And of course, one of David's advisors was like, "That man deserves death because he cursed you." And David was like, "No." And, David spared his life and showed him mercy. And then the next thing David did was he showed kindness to Mephibosheth because during everything, Mephibosheth had fled. This was Jonathan's son, Saul's grandson. And so he was like, "No, my Lord, he had been deceived because during that time, he was still unable to really do a lot for himself. And someone had told him, go opposite way." And so when David heard him, he wanted to restore him back to where he was. And Mephibosheth was pretty much like, "No, the fact that I'm able to still be at your table and that you have forgiven me, that's enough." Like he wasn't looking to have anything back because he was just happy that David was going to be put back to where he belonged and that, that was enough for him. And so the last thing we see that David shows kindness to another person who when him and his men were actually famished and they were running. And it was like he greeted them and he fed them and he made sure that not only David, but David and his troops was taken care of. And so we see that David wanted to honor him in such a great way and allow him to come with him. But the man being of age of over of 80, he was like, no, this is my time to just go back to where I'm from and allow myself to be buried. Like I'm not able to complete that trip with you. But he did want the honor of actually crossing the Jordan with David. And so it was like they said that all the people crossed the Jordan with the king. And after that, David had blessed the guy who was now 80, and he actually returned home. And it says the king's men crossed over to Gilgal. This is the last verse 40 in what I'm covering today. And it says all the troops of Judah and half the troops of Israel escorted the king on his way. So this was a really big shakeup for David, but on so many levels, it was what, God had actually forewarned. But we see that Absalom, like, being led purely by the spirit of revenge and just feeling like he was so greatly wronged, his sister, which again, you don't really hear much about after the fact, but that was kind of what drove him to just do so many things and to be so deceitful. And it's almost like the way he pretty much died was just a reflection of how he lived his life, like in haste, like being so quick to want something and going after it, but not really understanding or even having the capability to complete what he tried to start. So I just think that that's a way to end for the way he started. So his ending that he met was just, it was very fitting, right? So as you can see, I'm in a hotel lobby later on, and there's a couple of people walking past. So I'm going to end on that note. Love you guys. I'm glad that I was able to get something out this morning. All right. Be blessed.